there are some aspects, or some arguments, I think, or even, I mean, shall we say facts, that he presents which seem to have legitimacy, okay? And can we talk about the wall? I guess
Sure.
We know that the wall has been separated, like a separation wall or the barrier, and even some have likened it to the Berlin Wall. I think it was Reagan, I think it was Reagan, he stood on the wall and he's like, tear down this wall. But is that the same situation there? Like, should it be torn down? What's the go?
It's a very good example, and it might be a little bit long answer because there's a lot of aspects to this, but it's a good example because we talk a lot about Christ at the checkpoint, and that is the kind of the symbol that they use is that wall because it sits between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Now, first of all, I've been through that wall several times. It is an ugly wall. It's terrible. I feel bad for the Arabs that have to line up through it that work in Israel. It's probably not a nice place to stand every morning. On the other hand, everybody that talks about it in a negative sense always leaves out the fact that 12 years ago, the wall wasn't there. And when I moved to Israel 20 years ago, there was barely a checkpoint between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. I mean, there was a little guard station, but like the idea of the one soldier who stood there didn't even stop anyone on most days. And me and my friends would go into Bethlehem because they had great restaurants to eat at on the weekend, and Arabs were flowing into Jerusalem in the other direction. There was no problem. The wall is there for a reason. It wasn't arbitrarily set up by Israel just to treat the Palestinians cruelly. It was put there because buses and cafes were blowing up in Jerusalem every week. And it was either, in Israel, it came down to the decision of either we put up a wall that the suicide bombers can't get through, or we invade Bethlehem in force, and there's going to be a lot of casualties. Take the lesser of two evils, and so Israel put up a wall. What you also need to remember, though, is you're looking at that wall that they often photograph by Bethlehem, and the thing extends for a long distance.
I think it's 600 kilometers.
Only that one tiny portion is actually a concrete wall.
Oh, okay.
So only the portion around that part of eastern Jerusalem is a concrete wall. The rest of the thing is a fence. It's not nearly as impressive to photograph.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, that is interesting. I actually haven't seen that. And I have done a little bit of research, but I guess also, there's a complaint made that, let's say they built the wall and it's for the purpose of keeping, let's say, extremists. I don't like the word extremists, but people who want to blow themselves up. We'll keep them out, right? Because obviously that's a bad thing. But then, on the other hand, you have, I guess the complaint that, well, if that's the case, why is Israel building construction in occupied land? Or, why are they building that in Palestinian territory? Is that something you can comment on?
Well, first of all, let's remember that for the past 20 years, since the signing of the Oslo Accords, Israel has not built one new settlement. There's been no establishment of a new settlement since the Oslo Accords began. There have been establishment of what are called illegal outposts that individuals will go and throw onto a piece of land, onto an empty hill. Okay. And almost without exception, those things are torn down by the army because regardless of where someone tried to do that in the land of Israel, you're not allowed to just take a piece of land and set up a house. So the army comes and moves you out. But there hasn't been a new established settlement since the signing of Oslo Accords. So what they're talking about when they say that is just construction inside the settlements that already existed anyway. It's actually not affecting any piece of land that was previously empty.